think first and foremost, really to be able to anchor and tether the caregiver, the adult who is responsible for that child, is first and foremost, right? The old adage, secure your oxygen mask first. It's very challenging to calm someone down and to give them some sense of agency and grounding if we ourselves are really dysregulated. It's common sense, but to be able to do that is very sobering. So I think really first and foremost, channeling a sense of compassion for ourselves, channeling rest. I think rest for BIPOC folks and for Asian folks, particularly now, is an absolute necessary and a radical form of political resistance. There's going to be this pull to like do more because you're like, what the heck, this is awful. I'm worried about my parents taking a walk. I'm worried about sort of myself. I'm worried about sort of my kids. And I think that the pull to want to sort of do and act immediately, but I think first and foremost, and to the extent that you need that, to be able to rest, and to sort of center yourself. I think there's a lot happening with kids. I mean, kids across the board are already super anxious. They're irritable, they're anxious, they're lonely, they're isolated. This is across the board, across all races. For Asian kids and teens, for BIPOC kids and teens, for girls and young women, for poor kids and teens, as well as other marginalized groups, are without a doubt more disproportionately impacted. Why? Because when you're bullied and attacked and murdered, not because of anything heinous that you have done, but simply because of who you are, your gender, your sexuality, your race, that's not only dehumanizing, it's very, very scary. And this is true for adults and kids alike. And anxiety has abound in the past year. The uncertain nature of the pandemic. When is it going to end? Am I going to get impacted? What happens if I get it? What happens if I don't get sort of vaccinated? So it's just adding more anxiety that feels really untenable and unsustainable on top of everything else. So it's very, very sobering. And I think, really what parents and caregivers and educators we can do is check in with ourselves and with our kids on a regular basis. How are you doing? Yeah. What have you heard? What have you read? What are you thinking? Notice any significant changes in terms of signs or disruptions in mood, behavior, eating, sleeping, activity. I say this even as I realize my own sleeping, eating, everything has been sort of like disrupted. So on top of that already, talk about it. Talk about it. Especially, I want to really implore white parents and caregivers, because white parents and caregivers who often have had less experience in talking about race with their kids. Be direct, be clear, name the violence against Asians and BIPOC folks. How are you feeling about this? I'm feeling upset, scared, confused, helpless. I'm not sure sort of what to do. It's okay to not have answers. But silence can be very scary, and it can also be very problematic. Why? Because kids, especially little kids, when you're left to create a narrative, when little kids are trying to make sense of what is going on their own, and if they are already anxious or anxiously disposed, the narrative that they end up developing is often one that only emboldens anxiety and fear. So parents and adults cannot be silent. And silence also, we know, is often complicity in terms of systemic racism. The third thing that we could do is normalize and reassure. Feeling anxious and anger is really scary. Yeah? I treat a lot of phobias. So being scared of needles, being scared of dogs and heights, it's very, very disorganizing, sort of scary. But to be able to normalize and reassure reactions, feelings, and experiences. And I think a consistent message with Asian hate crimes in particular is that we don't belong. And feeling like one doesn't belong is extremely dysregulating and threatening. So we have to communicate to our kids if they're feeling dysregulated, angry, and they're vacillating between very strong and disorganizing feelings. It's okay to be angry, to be sad, to be mad. Yeah. This is especially hard for parents and caregivers because I think we want our kids to be okay. And when they're not okay, it makes us nervous and anxious. But the mechanism of how anxiety works is that when we're really quick to try to fix something in an anxious way without checking ourselves, it actually only emboldens and makes our kids more nervous and anxious. So I see a lot of parents and caregivers doing the very thing that we shouldn't do, right?